back when a victim helped solve the murder case. Let's see what this is about.
My girlfriend and I were in here playing pool. She said I need my cigarettes. I came out to get cigarettes out of the truck. When I walked out, I saw his legs and everything laying there.
Okay.
And I thought somebody got drunk, had too much, and I heard him say help.
Okay.
I came back around this side. I walked up on him. I saw the puddle. I thought it was vomit. I walked over there. When I got there, I realized it was blood. He said, help, help, I've been shot.
This horrifying 911 call came in at about 9 p.m. on December 18th, 2017, alerting the police about a potential murder attempt in the parking lot of a bar. When the detectives arrived, the victim was barely alive, clinging to his life by a thread. Little did he know that the tiny pieces of information he'd provide the detectives with would help them throughout their investigation.
Are you turned around looking at him, or are you looking at the rear?
Well, I did for a second. I saw the gun. I just like, I kind of looked forward and just froze for a second. And then, just like a second or two later, I heard a gunshot, and then I heard another gunshot. I felt my body just, I don't know, like almost levitate off the ground or something. I don't know.
However, the investigators would be left in chills when he would reveal a horrifying twist, telling them that he wasn't the only victim.
At that point, everything just changed.
After responding to the 911 call, detectives from Evansville Police Department rushed to the crime scene. Each passing second was crucial. As the victim had been shot, detectives needed to get to him in time. And fortunately, when they arrived at the scene of the crime, the victim was still alive, but was barely able to talk.
What can I help you with?
Where did I get shot? We don't know yet. We're still looking, guys. Hey, you bleeding on the bottom there?
Just hang in there, brother.
Fortunately, he was breathing and he was able to speak with us. He actually said his name was Steve.
Are you having any trouble breathing, partner? Every 5 minutes.
What I want you to do is just slowly keep taking your breaths in and out. You know how long you've been sitting out here?
You guys have tape?
Behind you in the back of my car, it's unlocked. Back of this car, it's unlocked.
God, bro.
The victim was identified as 20-year-old Steve. Since the paramedics were still on the way, detectives tried to help him out as much as they could. Steve's condition was critical and time was ticking. There were no eyewitnesses and no suspects on the scene. Steve could be their only hope. They needed him to talk, as this could be the only little time that they'd have to get any information from him. Because looking at Steve, it seemed like he wasn't going to make it.
Don't know the name? He says he's an older black male in a tan
Have you ever
jacket.
seen him before?
No.
Never seen him before? Was he here at the bar tonight? He just walked up on you?
Detectives asked him if he remembered anything about the man who shot him. He told the detectives that the shooter was an older African-American male and he was wearing a tan jacket. But Steve was quite hesitant while answering the questions. It seemed as if he was only telling half the truth. But given the condition he was in, detectives gave him the benefit of the doubt.
Were you at the bar tonight?
No.
Okay, how old are you? Hey, Lonnie?
Yeah.
Grab his wallet out of his back pocket. Where do you live?
I'm taking your wallet out, so don't move, okay?
Steve also told the detectives that he came here in his dad's car, a red Hyundai Sonata. But the shooter stole the car and drove away with his cell phone still inside.
Oh, so they got
Little
the
did the
record.
detectives know that this car was hiding another dark secret.
What year, do you know?
So they left the phone in the car. All they gotta do is trace his phone.
1, 2, 3, got it.
Right
He's got the light. Someone got the light.
You're fine,
We're
partner.
fine.
Keep breathing. Help your balance and breathe. Keep working
This is
through it,
the
okay?
shooting, and the guy stole the car. DOL for a red Honda Sonata. At this time, I do not have
Like, that
a
was
year
the dumbest thing.
for the
Took his
vehicle
car
itself.
with the phone.
Let's get his dad's information. We can.
They were gonna trace the car either
I
way.
got it. I got it.
But with the phone, it's literally like
Yeah.
a waypoint. Boom, he's there.
Yeah.
GG.
Hey, Steve, what's your dad's name?
Come back. Okay, go up now. Go up.
You're good.
Go up.
Ryder.
So they trying to get so much
Hey, if you guys
information
can get his dad's name at all,
from
if you
him
can't, I
but
understand,
he's
but
not
that way we
even
can get a
processing
plate number
it.
for the
Like he
vehicle.
said,
But his dad's
now
name.
Body feel like it's levitating or something.
Scott.
Even though Steve was able to provide the detectives with very little information, it was still enough to give the investigation a solid direction. And as Steve was taken to the hospital for treatment, detectives got to work. Contacting Scott, Steve's father, and locating his car was the topmost priority. But first, they acquired the CCTV footage from the parking lot of the bar where the shooting took place. And to their surprise, they spotted a suspicious figure.
This property right here?
Yes.
Is there a way to access these cameras that we'd be able to see?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Part of the investigation, especially in this day and age, is getting video footage. Luckily, where this occurred at, this is a major intersection. So we want to look at the parking lot video right away to see if there's anything there.
Yes.
Going through the CCTV recordings, investigators saw Steve drive into the parking lot in the red Sonata. Moments later, a man was seen walking in the same direction. This man precisely matched the description of the man Steve was talking about. But unfortunately, the exact spot where Steve was parked wasn't under surveillance, so the shooting wasn't captured on camera. However, just a little after the shooting took place, the man was seen speeding out of the parking lot in the red Sonata. For the investigation, this was a good start. They had their suspect on video. However, his true identity and whereabouts still remained a mystery.
With the information that Steve had told us, the description of the shooter, combined with the video that closely matched what the victim had told us, we believed that we had the suspect in that video.
While the detectives were discussing their next steps, they received a call from the hospital. It was good news. Steve was out of danger, and his condition was stable.
This is a critical injury that I believe most people don't survive.
As surprising as this was, detectives took a sigh of relief. For them, there was hope again. They made their way to the hospital to check up on Steve and see if he could provide them with more information about the tragic events he went through. And what he told the detectives next would bring them a step closer to solving the mystery.
At this point, things start changing. Steve starts telling us the full story. He started to be honest with the detectives and admitted that what had happened was that this is a drug deal that went bad.
So I'm going to tell you basically that night, okay, you told us that you went there to sell this guy dope, marijuana.
Yes.
Okay. Who set up this meeting?
Jaleel.
Okay, Jaleel. Did you guys meet up at Walmart that time?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Steve revealed that he was at the parking lot to sell marijuana to someone.
Wow.
Although he had his regular buyers, this time it was someone new. Steve said that he knew a man named Jalil, and he had sold him marijuana before. Jalil told Stephen that he had a friend named Jeremiah who also wanted to buy marijuana from Steve. And since Jalil was one of Steve's regular buyers, Steve trusted him and agreed to meet Jeremiah. Jalil got Steve and Jeremiah in touch, and the two decided to meet at the bar's parking lot.
When did he say anything about Jeremiah? What was the context of that conversation?
That we're wrong.
He said, I have a buddy that needs some, so I said, yeah, it was okay. And then Jaleel said that he sent to my number. I was like, okay, that's fine.
So Steve actually believed he was going to be meeting Jalel's friend there, Jeremiah, to sell him marijuana.
As they discussed, Steve drove to the meeting point and waited. But things took a turn when Jeremiah arrived with a gun in his hand, and what was supposed to be an ordinary drug deal turned into a tragedy.
Did you see him when you pulled in, or was...
I texted him saying here. He said, okay, be there in 2 minutes. I said, okay.
Was the car locked?
It was locked until I saw it at the last second. I just locked it.
Okay. All right. So is he completely in the car, or is his feet still outside, or do you know?
His feet were still kind of outside his butt, like.
Are you turned around looking at him, or are you looking in the rear?
Well, I did for a second. I saw the gun, and I just I looked forward and just froze for a second, and then a second or two later, I heard a gunshot, and then I heard another gunshot. And I felt my body just, I don't know, almost levitate off the ground or something. I don't know. I knew I had been shot. I didn't remember anything after that.
However, that wasn't all. What Steve revealed next was what truly left the detectives shocked. Something they could never have seen coming.
He actually informed them that there had been another person in the vehicle named Christopher Hoffling, who'd been his friend, and he possibly had been shot. At that point, everything just changed.
I didn't know if Chris got shot by the first shot, or if he just shot up into the air, or what happened. But I know I got shot, and that's all I could focus on.
Steve said that he wasn't alone in the car. He was accompanied by his friend Christopher Hoefling, and Jeremiah fired shots at both Steve and Chris.
Do you remember what happened then?
I got shot. I laid there for a second. so I couldn't move, and then I felt my head slam on the concrete.
When you say you lay there, are you talking about in the car?
Yeah, I was just sitting in the car.
Okay. And then you felt your head hit the concrete.
Yeah, I felt my whole body had had slam into the concrete.
Do you remember if you opened the door?
No, he drugged me out.
Okay. Was he saying anything at that point, or do you recall?
I don't remember hearing anything at all.
Okay.
I just remember hearing a loud bang, and that was about it.
Do you remember the car driving off?
Oh, yeah, because I hit the ground, and there's no way for me to just be pulling out the car unless he's stealing it. Then I was right next to the car, so I lay there. I could move. My head would move, my arms would move, and finally, I don't know how I moved my head, but I turned to see if Chris was there, and he was gone too. So the car and Chris was gone.
While Jeremiah dragged Steve out of the car and threw him on the pavement, he left Chris inside and drove away. This completely changed the entire course of the investigation. The investigation had now turned into a race against time. Now there was another victim who had been shot and was most likely in serious need of help, or was possibly already dead. On one hand, detectives were relieved that Steve was out of danger. But on the other hand, they faced a new challenge. They needed to find the stolen car and Chris.
The case goes on super ramped up, high alert now. We're looking for another victim. Steve was able to tell us that he thought that maybe his buddy Christopher was shot. So we got to find this car. That's the bottom line. We got to find it immediately because we know there's a second person involved.
And even if Chris had somehow survived the gunshot injury, the chances of him making it out alive without immediate medical aid were extremely thin. And since it had only been an hour since the crime was reported, detectives were hoping that Chris was still alive. Eager to get more information about Chris's whereabouts and figure out a way to make contact with him, investigators reached out to Chris's father, thinking he might know something.
Mr. Eifling,
Yes, sir.
Is it okay if I step in, sir?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
I need you to go to the other room, please. I apologize, thank you. Oh, no, that's okay. I just getting where I sleep. I work out of St. Mary's. I might even seen you out there. Okay. Yeah, what do you got?
Are you related to Chris?
Yes, I am.
Okay, now, who's your relationship?
Son.
Okay, you know, here?
Chris is not here. He drives a red truck. He's not here.
Okay. Does he stay here with you on a regular basis?
He comes and goes. He's got a friend at the apartment. Why has he done something?
Well, we don't know.
Okay.
There's another gentleman that's been shot, and all they can get out of him is that Chris was possibly with him, and that he possibly was shot. So we're trying to locate him and find out if he has been or not. You know how to.
Chris's father was completely unaware of what had happened to his son. Detectives had to be really careful what they told Chris's father. They didn't want him to get his hopes up because they knew that he'd been severely injured. But they also didn't want to imply that there was almost no chances of him surviving the attack. In one hopeful attempt to get in touch with Chris, detectives asked Chris's father to call him.
I can call a cell phone. You want to do that?
Yes, please. You know, you said he goes to a friend's house? Yeah. Can I come with you, sir?
You can call Chris. Just ask him if he's okay.
Thank you,
Okay.
Friggy99 for the
I've
sub.
never had anything. I would be really shocked myself.
I mean,
You
for
know,
the follow,
if he's in
too.
something, I'd be.
Hang up right now. Okay. I'm Matt Taylor. Okay. If he calls,
Okay.
gets in
What's
touch
up,
with you,
DJ?
just, like
Small?
I said, the other person that was shot said that he thought that your son Chris had been shot also.
You didn't. Oh, Chris didn't do it.
No, sir. No, we think Chris may have.
Oh, he might have been. He might have been on the receiving end too.
Yes, sir.
I mean, he's a good kid, so you know.
Okay. Well, like I said, we're just going off limited information. So,
Well, I appreciate it. So then I would, if I hear anything, I will let you.
just call 911. So Officer Matt Taylor came by.
With barely any new information, and with Chris not answering his cell phone, it was starting to look as if the detectives were headed towards a dead end.
As more time goes on, detectives and officers are thinking there's less of a chance that we're actually going to find Christopher alive. So we really have to get moving as quick as we can, because if we don't find this guy, he's probably not going to survive.
The clock was ticking, and the detectives were running short of any clues which could lead them to Chris. But then they remembered something Steve had told them. According to Steve, he'd left his phone in the car, and the attacker drove away while Chris was still inside, wounded. Now, tracking Steve's phone was the only way which could lead the detectives to the car.
One of the things the phone records showed us was the last location known of Steve's phone, and that was in the area of Washington and Lombard Avenue. We're residential area, not a whole lot goes on there. It's within about 5 minutes of where the shooting happened. So we concentrated on that area that next morning, believing that we're going to find the vehicle somewhere close.
On December 19th, 2017, detectives started searching for Steve's red Sonata car in the residential area of Lombard Avenues, and this was when they made a startling discovery.
So officers started looking, and lo and behold, they found the vehicle there parked in the garage, the red Sonata, and inside there we found the victim, Christopher, lying in the passenger seat, slumped over at that time. He'd been shot about 4 times, and he was deceased. So everything again changed in this case now, because not only before we had an attempted murder, we had a stolen vehicle, now we had actual homicide that's happened.
This was a tragic discovery. Chris was gone. Detectives broke the heartbreaking news to Chris's family, and their lives were forever changed by this sudden loss. Although detectives had found the stolen vehicle and Chris, there was no sign of the perpetrator anywhere around. As detectives went ahead with the investigation, Steve's phone records became a key piece of evidence, ultimately revealing the true identities of the 2 suspects.
We also were able to learn through these records that Jalil's real name is Jalil Fellows, Jeremiah, that was supposed to be buying the weed from Steve, that was an alias, and that his real name was Earl Martin.
Detectives soon uncovered startling details about Earl Martin.
When checking the real name of Earl Martin, we discover that he is on parole, and he's got an arrest record and a history of a previous robbery, which kind of heightens the detectives on his involvement, because this would fall into line of what happened this evening.
Earl's criminal history made him a prime suspect, especially due to his clear motive. However, the challenge of uncovering whether Earl or Jalil was the shooter still loomed over the investigation. Using police records, detectives located Earl's address and summoned him to the station for questioning.
After this.
Here you go, man. All right. Hey, I'm Dave.
I got one more reaction.
Okay, I'm just I'm sorry.
6 minutes.
I understand. A lot of times the guys that bring you in here, they don't know what's going on, man. They're just told to bring somebody in. I don't know, you know. I understand you're probably frustrated on how long you've been sitting around.
Yeah, for a while.
Okay, all right. Well, can I do anything to make you more comfortable? You good?
Just tell me what I'm charged with.
Okay. Well, you're in a locked facility. You're talking to me, okay? So I gotta read you Miranda warnings, okay?
Yeah.
You understand that? You understand, right?
Initially, detectives tried to build a rapport with him, making him feel comfortable and at ease.
You wanna talk to me?
I just want to know what I'm being charged with.
Okay. You wanna talk to me then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Man, I'm here to talk to you about some stuff that happened last night. Okay? You want to tell me where you were last night?
Well, you want to tell me if am I being charged with anything?
I can't tell you one way or the other right now. That's why we're talking. Okay?
I think you would know.
This is the dude that shot both of them. And he killed Chris and critically injured the Steve dude, but Steve survived and Chris died. So
the detective, you've been doing this for a while.
He stole Steve.
You know I've been in the system.
I know you're, man, listen, I know you're not dumb. I seen that you have, you know, a prior for strong arm and stuff like that, so I'm not trying to play you for a fool. I know you know how the game works.
Okay, so I'll be in charge, in other words.
That's why we're here talking. That's why I want to talk to you.
Instead of stating the charges outright, the detective focused on getting Earl's version of the incident, insisting they already had evidence.
I got technique to
listen,
get you
the bottom line is this. Last night, some stuff happened, okay? And it didn't happen in the best spot. There's cameras everywhere. There's a lot of moving parts, okay? And that's how I literally would come knocking on your door today, all right? I've been working on this all night. There's a lot of stuff going on. I would like to have your side of the story, you know what I'm saying? Because there literally is 2 sides of every story. But you have to be willing to tell me your side of the story for me to hear it.
Like a seasoned criminal, Earl chose to remain tight-lipped, revealing nothing.
Yeah, I think if I'm being charged with something, I better have an attorney. I just think that's for the best. I don't really exactly know what you're talking about, so go ahead and charge
It's
me,
all
and
gonna
I'll
be that
figure it
one
out when I go to court.
way the cops do their thing.
Sit tight, man. When we think with you, okay?
All right.
This dude ain't trying to hear no.
With no
he ain't
valuable
trying to
leads
give
from
up
Earl,
no
detectives turned their attention to Jalil.
He just saying.
However, before they could track him down, the news of the homicide had already reached him, triggering its own consequences.
Social media, it's made it across news networks. They've also reported on the fact at this point the vehicle's been found, there's been a homicide. So Jalil knows that police are looking for him. And what he actually does is his mom brings him downtown to talk to detectives. So he actually came on his own accord, wanted to speak with detectives, and kind of headed off a little bit.
Jalil arrived at the police station on his own, insisting he could help detectives with the investigation.
I'm Dave Smith, man, police department. I'm a detective, okay, but glad you came down here, man. I really am. Speaks a lot about you. Got your mom with you. I respect the fact and I appreciate the fact you came down here on your own. It says a lot.
Even though Jalil knew that his little drug purchases from Steve were illegal and could get him into trouble, he had realized that the situation was far more grave than just that. Steve had barely survived a deadly attack, while Chris was not so lucky. Jalil wanted to help the detectives as much as possible.
Do you know why you're here?
Got shot
Okay.
4 times.
Tell me about it.
And sat there and suffered until
I've seen that you guys found a car or something in the river on the news. Well, I didn't see it, but my mom was telling me about it today, so I kind of think it has something to do with that.
Okay.
He admitted knowing Steve, explaining that he bought marijuana from him and had only shared information about Steve with Earl for the same reason. Detectives, however, pressed him further for more details about Earl.
Did you know that Earl's capable of something like this?
I mean, I really didn't know Earl. I mean, that's what, I really didn't know him. I mean, I've talked to him at work. I mean, kid around, but nothing about no robberies or nothing like that.
But when it came to the homicide, he remained secretive, refusing to reveal anything about his or Earl's involvement.
I've read a little report on the internet, and then I was like, it just threw me for a loop.
I'm sure it was a gut wrencher, man.
Yeah.
Is that why you and your mama?
Yeah, we're just, yes.
Uh-huh.
And like, I just,
He's saying he don't
I don't even know what to say.
Was this a
Recognizing his cunning tactics, the detectives took a different approach, reassuring him of his innocence while subtly pressuring him to disclose Earl's wrongdoing.
Jalil, that honesty at this point is important, man. It's valuable. I mean, honesty is valuable. I had no reason to believe that you're a horrible person. Okay, and then you confirm. Listen, my job is to read people. You know what I'm saying? And then I meet you in the context that I did, which is going to look good on you. You know what I'm saying? Which is good. And you're being honest with me thus far. You know what I mean? Which is awesome. You're basically showing your character, and I respect it. Get out of that, man. Yeah.
The detective then confronted him with more direct questions, backed by the evidence they had already gathered.
I got all the text messages, man. Okay? And that stuff, at this point, man, I just gotta wonder, like, did you know this robbery was gonna turn out to be murder, man? You know what I'm saying? Did you know?
I didn't know it was gonna be a murder. I didn't know.
That's why I saw Jalil planned to set him up to get him robbed for all that weed. And it ended up, wow, I knew it.
I like to think that.
I really didn't.
Okay.
Or am I just yapping?
So the robbery, let me just say this. Earl, okay, he hits these 2 pumps for dope. He takes their weed. That's a small drop in the bucket to murder. I mean, how do we jump from hitting these two kids for their weed to murder, man? You know what I'm saying?
I don't.
You did not know about the murder?
I don't know about I didn't know. I seen it on the news like everybody else.
Did you think he was legitimately going to just hit these kids?
I didn't know
and steal their
I
dope?
don't know what he was going to do. I don't know.
Despite the detectives' efforts, Jalil refused to confirm whether it was a case of robbery and murder. Instead, he exercised his legal rights and halted the interrogation.
Do I need a lawyer? That's all I need to know. Do I need a lawyer? Because it seems like you're trying to blame me for.
No, I'm not trying to blame you.
Because, like I said,
Jalil, I'm not trying to blame you for anything. I'm trying to find out the truth.
At that point, the detectives grew convinced that both Jalil and Earl were involved in the crime and were deliberately misleading them. Determined to break their facade, the detectives carefully planned their next decisive move.
During this time, with the fact that we have two suspects that are not providing much information, a search warrant is obtained for Earl Martin's home. The search warrant is executed, and we're looking for any evidentiary value, any clothing items, weapons, blood, trace evidence, anything at all that will link him to the actual shooting scene.
During the search of Earl's house, authorities stumbled upon pivotal evidence that would turn out to be crucial to further solidify Earl's involvement in the crime. The same tan jacket that Earl was wearing on the night of the shooting was found with blood smeared across it. On top of that, with a .380 handgun and the marijuana being found at Earl's home, it seemed like all the pieces were falling right into place.
Ultimately, the search warrant did provide some very useful evidence in this case. Bloody clothing was found in Earl Martin's residence, and the clothing matched the video surveillance of this older black male with a tan jacket. We also found a bag containing a .380 handgun with some marijuana in the actual bag and some unspent rounds, bullets.
All the evidence was collected and sent to the lab for testing. When the result came back, it uncovered a shocking truth.
From there, that evidence being sent to the lab and later on came back and confirmed that the blood on the clothing belonged to Steve, and the handgun and the bullets matched the firearms and casings that were found at the scene of the crime.
With all the evidence, it was confirmed that Earl was the actual shooter. However, detectives remained skeptical about Jalil's involvement in the homicide. So they obtained a search warrant for both of their cell phones, and that's when they uncovered a hidden secret.
Detectives also obtained search warrants for both cell phones belonging to Jalil Fellows and Earl Martin. And the information that was recovered from those cell phones proved 100% that both of those people, Earl Martin and Jalil Fellows, both knew that there was going to be a robbery attempt. And that was apparently the actual plan to rob Steve of his money and marijuana. But Earl Martin was the actual shooter. So with that information all coming together, there was enough evidence where arrest warrants were obtained for both Earl Martin and Jalil Fellows.
All this time, Jalil had been trying to showcase himself as innocent to the detectives. When he'd been interrogated, he portrayed Earl as the sole person behind the heinous act. But an exchange of text messages between them brought the whole truth to light. Even though Jalil was not present at the scene of the crime and hence didn't pull the trigger, he was still as much part of the planned robbery attempt on Steve and Chris as Earl was. But fortunately, it was now time for them to pay for their sinister acts. With overwhelming evidence against them, both Jalil and Earl were taken into custody. But even after their arrest, neither of them confessed to anything. Then, several months later, on July 12, 2018, before the case went to trial, Jalil finally opened up to the detectives about the entire homicide. All of a sudden, he wanted to speak the truth. Chris's blood was on his hands, and the guilt finally got to him.
About half a year after the incident occurred, Jalil decided this is the one to speak with detectives at headquarters. What had happened was that Earl Martin's homicide case was coming up, and Jalil knew that. And I think Jalil wanted a little bit better type of sentence. So what he did is he came downtown with his lawyer, and he actually decided he wanted to go through the whole process of what had happened before this case actually made it to the courtroom.
Jalil, really, I'm perfectly okay with just basically starting from the beginning. We discussed before your relationship, how you knew Earl Martin, you know what I mean? And I don't doubt you told me 100% the truth on everything. I don't have any reason to doubt that. But with that said, if anything is different, it's okay. It's not a big deal. Don't feel like, I got to stick to my guns because I've already told them something once, okay? Don't worry about that. Don't even think about it.
He started by explaining his relationship with Earl and how the two of them were connected to the victims.
So if you would, man, just start me with how you met Earl, and we'll just work our way forward to the end.
I met Earl at work. I was his boss. He was a pretty good worker for me, and we just kind of just talked about stuff with kids and stuff like that. We really didn't talk about much. But then we started talking about trying to find out a way to get some quick money or whatever. And that's how it came up on the robbery scheme. And he asked me if I knew anybody, and I told him no at first, but then I really did know some people. So then I thought about it, and I just sent him a text saying that we could hit up my plug or whatever. And that's whenever the plan got into motion, I guess. I told him he could hit him up. If I had to ask him if I could get out his number first.
This time, Jalil confessed that he did help Earl get in touch with Steve, knowing very well that Earl would try to steal from him. However, he claimed that he had no knowledge of the murder and was only aware of the robbery. He also informed the detectives about his communication with Earl following the incident.
He told me that he asked if he could call me, and I said yeah. In one of the text messages, and then he called me. He's like, "You'll see." He's like, "Stuff went bad, and you'll see it on the news." That's all he said, and then we hung up, and that was the last we talked.
More than 20 years.
Okay. So that was afterwards.
Yeah.
I see the text. I know the text.
Had been afterwards because he just like stuff went bad, and you'll see it on the news. That's basically what he told me, and then I seen it on the news, like where it kind of happened or whatever. So that's how I really figured out like what was going on.
From his confession, detectives were able to draw a clear conclusion.
He said he didn't know anything about Earl and his intention to murder Christopher or shoot anybody on the scene there, so that was very important for us.
Putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, detectives were able to map out the chain of events that had transpired on that fateful day.
So Jalil, even though he minimized his involvement, he had set it up. He knew what was going to happen, that Steve and Christopher were going to get robbed. They had met in the parking lot. Earl Martin got in the back seat of the car, and he instantly just shot both Steve and Christopher. Steve was able to get out of the vehicle and survive. Unfortunately, Christopher, he didn't survive.
By then, the motive became very clear to the detectives. The murder was deemed senseless, committed solely for the theft of marijuana by a ruthless criminal like Earl, with Jalil as his accomplice.
I believe that Steve and Christopher that night got in way over their head with a career criminal.
Oh, this is some weed and some
Earl Martin's a bad guy. He's proven that his whole life. He's in and out. He's a frequent flyer in our system.
With sufficient evidence against him, Earl Martin was charged with multiple offenses.
For the crimes involving Christopher Hoffling and Steve, the charges for Earl Martin are murder, robbery with serious bodily injury, murder attempted with a firearm, and kidnapping while hijacking a vehicle. Earl Martin is convicted and sentenced to 135 years in prison. Jalil Fellows is convicted of robbery. He's sentenced to 5 years as part of a plea deal.
After a long wait, Chris and Steve finally got justice. However, for Chris's family and loved ones, the loss remained unbearable. Before we conclude, we want to extend our heartfelt condolences for Chris Hoefling and his loved ones. What are your thoughts on this case? Why are such...
R.I.P. R.I.P. Chris, man. It's just crazy, man. It's just... Anyways, R.I.P. to Chris. Condolences to the fam, man. R.I.P. Mom.